Hey guys, welcome to the Paint with Lovejoy website. This is the place for first-time and beginners to get comfortable with the painting process. If you have never painted, I am definitely the teacher for you. I will give you permission to play, to create with your hands, and I do consider this adult kindergarten, where you get to make memories with yourself or with loved ones. And you will notice that creative time is something that you will reference for the rest of your life. I do encourage you to send me photos of your paintings. And when you're done with my YouTube videos, please check out my Paint Your Pet course for even more in-depth and kind of my signature class. It's a lot of fun. Before we get started, I want to say thank you for being you. And I also want to give you permission to play today. I'm going to encourage that you take a lot of progress photos, and I do recommend that you turn off your distractions. Put your phone on mute. Please know that mistakes will happen. We call them happy accidents. And I'm going to encourage you to breathe throughout the painting process. Here are your recommended supplies and the colors for this particular video. This video also has a traceable, a line drawing at the beginning, and you can either purchase the traceable and transfer, or you could pause the video and draw it freehand, whichever you feel comfortable doing. Again, progress photos are important, and I'm going to encourage that you pause and play the video as much as you need and rewatch anything that you want. Now let's go ahead and get started painting. All right, guys, so grab your first progress photo. This is going to be a fun painting today. We're going to be working on our blending and some subtle color changes. So we're going to start with the medium flat brush, and I'm using white with a little bit of yellow and a tiny amount of orange. And here you can see where I'm mixing that orange kind of on the perimeter to play with that color. Um, and if yours is a little lighter or darker than mine, that's okay. The more comfortable you get with mixing your paint, the easier it is to do some of the subtle colors. I do recommend that you apply your paint a little bit thicker and make sure you're covering the texture of the canvas. Now we're using that color, we're putting it kind of in between that mountainscape. And if you have to mix your color a second or third time, it's okay if there's a little variety. Now we're taking that same color into where this would be reflecting onto the river. And as we go through the painting today, all I want you to do is use your power of observation and mimic what you see on the video. It does not have to be exact, but just kind of coming close, using this as a base guideline. So here you can see I added a little bit more orange, just a little bit darker. Then we're going to add a little bit of white. And again, doing the perimeter mixing, so that way there's still a little bit of that orange yellow in there. But taking that white and kind of going on the top of the sunset area and giving it a little bit as we go from darker spaces into lighter spaces towards the top of the canvas. Now we're going to use the direct white and give a little bit of a buffer, and we're putting this right above the kind of orangish sherbety color, and we'll put this on either side of the reflection. And what this is going to do is when we switch to our blue color, we'll be mixing our blue into the white instead of into the orange. And the reason we do this is if we mixed the blue into the orange, because they're complementing colors, we would kind of have a muddled, not so attractive color. So by putting this buffer of white on the perimeter, it makes it easier to have that transition. So again, we've got our white above and on either side of the reflection. You do want to clean your brush, and then we're going to go to a super light blue. So pulling some white aside, a little bit of blue goes a long way to do this really subtle hazy blue. And like I said earlier, you're going to mix this on the top, and then you'll mix it into the white that we put on there. But I want you to be controlled enough that you stop before you start mixing the blue into the orange. Now, there was a nice tip on there. Please remember to breathe. Go at your own pace. You do not have to paint as fast as the video. Take this at your time and your pace. All right, so that is that super, super light blue. It's kind of hard to see on the video, but we're going to do the same thing in that river below. Um, After we add a little bit darker blue, I wanted a little touch more blue, so you can adjust that if you want. And this is kind of a sunrise painting, so that's why we're being very muted and subtle with our colors. If you want to paint a little messier, it's actually a lot of fun, so give yourself permission to be a little sloppy with this painting. Just kind of let loose and have fun. All right, so clean that brush really good. We're going to add a little bit of black to our light blue mixture. So here I'm going to make that light blue again, kind of come close to the shade, and then we're going to add a smidge, a tiny, tiny amount of black. And same thing where you see that I did the perimeter mixing, gives you a little bit more control, and then also allows you to have your original color still there. Again, if yours was lighter or darker than mine, totally okay. Embrace where you're at for today's painting. So we are going a little bit more of that blue-gray where this water is. And it's again just kind of a reflection of what is happening in the sky, and it does not have to be exact. Now the place again where this color, this blue-gray or the light blue, um, reaches the white paint, be a little more controlled with your brush strokes as you blend into that and as you come close to the orange. If you happen to blend both together and you don't like the color, just use a paper towel and wipe it off, and then go back and reapply the appropriate paint. So here we're going a little bit darker, and I did have to make my blue and white mixture again, but going a little bit darker with a touch more black, and we're putting some shadows here. And I want you to observe where I'm placing the shadow. And this is kind of at the top of the river where the land is meeting the water, getting a bit of a shadow in there, grabbing a little bit more of the black and going a touch darker at the very top of this. With your brush, you can use light pressure, and with the light pressure, you'll get soften some of those lines in between your colors. So even here where we're adding this darker gray on top of the blue, just that light pressure is going to help it blend together. So now getting a little more practice, adding a little more blue to that mixture to kind of help break up this shadow, but it's still kind of a blue-gray. Again, does not have to be exact to what I'm doing, just use this as a base guideline. For blending, if you want, wipe off any excess paint on your brush, and then again with that light pressure, just go back where the two colors meet and you can soften that line between the two. So a good place to take a progress photo. If you need to take a break, go right ahead and come back to your painting. But again, take this at your own pace. You don't have to go super fast. So now I'm going back to that light blue, going even lighter by adding more white to it. And we're going to move into the mountain area, and we're going to work on some wet on wet blending. So again, going back to that super light blue and then adding a little bit of black to kind of do a bluish gray. It does look kind of similar to what's in the sky. That's okay. And we're going to need more, so I'm making a little bit of a bigger batch here. Again, if you have to mix your color 2 or 3 times, it's actually good for you to do that because your brain's taking in information each time that you mix it. And each time that you mix, it'll be easier to create the shade you're after with practice. So we are filling in a good portion of the mountain, kind of except for the top area. And we'll be putting a darker shadow in there and then doing some blending. But we are putting our base color on first with this super light blue-gray. And because this is wet, and then we're going to put a darker color on top of it, we'll be able to do some wet on wet blending. So now I'm adding more blue and more black, basically going for a darker gray blue. And this is going to go at the top of the mountain, and literally I'm just going to use the width of my brush. I am going over those traceable lines, kind of getting my placement here. I'll put it in one other spot. Then I'm going to wipe off the brush and then go back with a slightly damp brush and blend this into the base color. And this is actually a lot of fun. So you can clean the brush, wipe off any excess paint, maybe dot off some extra water, and then again, just light pressure, a little back and forth movement, and you can see already how much it softens the line and how it kind of creates a new color in between the two colors you're using. If you need to, you can grab some of that light blue again. If your paint's starting to dry, grab some fresh light blue paint and then use that as a bit of a medium to do some blending. Again, this is another thing that gets more comfortable with more and more practice. We are going to do this twice because we have a mountain on the left-hand side and we're going to recreate the same formula. Again, remember to breathe. You're doing great. Just the fact that you're showing up and painting today, you are already successful no matter how your painting turns out. All right, take another progress photo, and then we're going to recreate that same process on the other side. So same brush, medium flat brush, white with a little bit of blue, and then a tiny amount of black. This is a good spot that you can see how close you might be getting to your color mixing or color matching. And again, if it is a slightly different shade, don't stress about it. There's enough other stresses in your life that you don't need to stress about your painting today. There we go. Got to reload my white. Probably going to make a little bit more of that color and then again fill in that mountain and then make our darker shade. Nice. And take a moment to notice how you feel right now while you're painting. You may be a little stressed about your painting. That's an appropriate stress. But hopefully while you're painting, you forget about the rest of the world, the rest of your drama, anything at work or family. You just kind of get to forget about it while you're painting. So again, as you're laying that base, I am going over some of those places where the traceable lines are, and then we'll be doing the darker color on the top. Remember to apply your paint a little bit thicker, and that make the paint stay wet a little bit longer and make it easier for you to do some of your blending. So now going back in, adding more blue and black to our mixture, going 3 or 4 shades darker. And still just kind of playing with that perimeter mixing. Hopefully you kind of like the perimeter mixing and take it into your other paintings. All right, here I'm actually doing a little bit of blending while I'm putting that darker shade on there, so that's always an option. And sometimes I do that more when the paint feels like it's starting to dry, so that way it's not more dry by the time I go back to do the blending. So a lot of times with painting, you do have to adjust on the fly based on what your paint is doing and what your environment is doing. If you're painting outside, your paint is actually going to dry 2 times faster than it would be if you painted inside. All right, take another progress photo. We've got a few more things to do to create our underpainting, and then we'll take a break, let it dry, and then come back in for the final stages. So going back to that blue and white mixture, I forgot that little mountain in the very background. We're going to fill that in, go over those traceable lines, fill in that space. And then we're going to take a slightly darker shade and do a little bit of shading on there. There we go, just using what I've already got on the plate. We're going to increase this line going down to the horizon line. Kind of define that edge of the mountain a little bit more. Again, light pressure. If you feel like you need to do it on the other side, go right ahead and do that. Nope, dropped a little bit of water on my plate or on my canvas. If that happens to you, if you get a little bit of water that drops on there, just use your paper towel to soak it up. Because if that water droplet stays on there, it's just going to eat through the acrylic paint and take it right back to the canvas because this is water-based paint. All right, so still using that medium flat brush, I'm going to be doing a mixture of green with a little bit of white and then a little bit of black. The reason we're adding black to a lot of our paint mixtures today is because this is an early morning sunrise, so things are kind of hazy and misty and still kind of in that gray realm. So by adding a tiny amount of black to your colors, that mutes the saturation and gives it a bit more of this early morning kind of moody vibe. So again, this color was white and green with a little bit of black. And this is going to be the meadow that's on the other side of the water formation. And then we've got the tiny little corner of land in the bottom left-hand corner. All right, and same thing, if you have to mix your color or shade 2 or 3 times, don't stress about the exact same thing. And we do want to make sure that we're going over all the lines, all the canvas texture, and applying our paint thick enough to fill in the spaces and fill in the texture. So here, go a little touch darker, fill it in that last corner. And after this section is painted, there should be 0 canvas space showing on your painting. And this is what we call the underpainting, where there's nothing left. So take your progress photo. You're going to take a 15-minute break, let your painting dry. I'm going to have a little ad for my Paint Your Pet class, and then we'll come back and pick up the painting. So do notice how you feel. Hopefully you are a little more relaxed. Now my Paint Your Pet class is my favorite class that I teach, and it's great to learn to paint when you paint something that you love. If you have never painted, I am a perfect teacher for you. And just look at all these great smiles, my happy students. Many, 80% of them are first-time painters and have done an amazing job. So I do offer this workshop as an in-person workshop in 2 locations, as well as an online course. So that way, anywhere you're at, you can follow my easy and very logical steps for painting your pet. You can also paint your favorite animal, no humans, but favorite animal is acceptable in class. And as you're looking at my student photos, you will notice some pop art options and a lot of realistic options. You have both choices in class and you have both choices in the online version. You will impress yourself and your pet, and definitely check out the Paint Your Pet course and that discount code. And now let's go ahead and get back into your current painting. You're doing great. All right, so you do want to make sure this is dry. So if you do need to take a little bit longer, because I realized the ad was not 15 minutes long, but take a little bit longer. You do want to make sure that your background is dry. We're going to start putting in the forest some foliage. So we're going to do blue and green and a little bit of white. And I am actually mixing this with the medium flat brush, but I will be using the pointy brush to apply the tree shapes in here. So again, it is black and green and blue and a touch of white. I like to add the white at the end because then it helps me kind of bring it down to the shade that I'm looking for instead of starting with the white. I know in a lot of my other videos, I usually have you start with the lighter color first. So sometimes we do things differently. All right, so now switching to the pointy brush after I've mixed the paint. And because we're going to have kind of a forest shape on both sides, they're going to go in front of the rock formation. What I'm going to do is kind of do the tops of the trees, a bunch of vertical lines for the tops of the trees, and then we're going to do some little dots for the foliage. So again, don't overthink the process. Pause the video as much as you need to. You can actually pause the video and take a screenshot and zoom in closer if you need to see some of the details that I'm doing. So again, here we're using the pointy brush. We're basically doing the tree trunks for each of our trees. And you can have as many or as few trees as you want on your painting. If you don't want any trees at all, you can completely skip this step. So I want you to play with your pressure as you're doing this, kind of play with the light pressure. Light pressure creates a little bit of a skinnier line. A little more pressure creates a wider line. And it's okay if you have varied widths of lines for your tree trunks, because we will be putting foliage on top of this, and we can cover up anything that you're like, I don't really like this so much, or this doesn't really work here. It is nice to just be able to cover it with paint and foliage. All right. So here I started realizing that I didn't need to actually make the tree trunks going all the way to the horizon line because the foliage is going to be there. So that's why I'm only doing kind of these half lines, but basically making sure that the top of these lines, this is going to be the tree tops. These are going to be the little bit more important sections of keeping these defined. Where that horizon line is, where that gray green and the rocks meet, that's our horizon line. Where that is, that's going to be all filled with foliage. So after we do this next section, you'll see what I'm talking about. So for the foliage, I'm still using that meaty or the pointy brush and just little dots. And I'm keeping it super skinny and small at the top of each of these lines. And then as I go down towards the horizon line, then they expand out, maybe have their branches, and then we're definitely overlapping all these dots. And it's going to feel weird at the beginning. So trust the process. Keep going. Maybe do one half the right hand side before you do the left hand side, and you'll see kind of how the progress is happening. So feel free at any point, take a progress photo just to get some of those stages in there. And if you are finding that you're kind of shaky, exhale as you touch the brush to the canvas, and that will actually help alleviate any of the shakes and alleviate any muscle fatigue or tight muscles. Again, remember it's just light pressure, a little dot, and get in the habit of every couple of dots, go back and grab more paint because you're going to get into a really good groove with this. But if you don't keep grabbing more paint, you're technically not applying anything to the canvas. So again, every couple of dots, grab more paint. And take your time. This is not a race. You do not have to go as fast as the video. If you want, watch the video till the end of this section and then go back and work on yours so you kind of know what it looks like um, before you do your own. If you need to, you can move up to the medium flat brush or a larger brush. And a few brush maintenance things to look at. Sometimes you might get a lot of buildup on your brush. It is okay if you wipe off any excess paint, possibly even fully clean your brush, grab fresh paint, and then go back to applying. So just a few kind of things to keep on the lookout as you are making all these repetitive dots. Again, you want to overlap the dots. And if you need to, get out of your chair, look at your painting from a distance of 5 to 10 feet away, and notice that it looks a little bit better, looks a little bit more of what it's supposed to look like as you look at it from that distance. This has actually been dubbed the Monet effect, that as we walk away from a painting, it's amazing how much our brain fills in the extra details and goes, oh, instead of just blobs of color, those are trees, those are water lilies, those are Van Gogh's Starry Night. So our brain does take in all the information and it fills in a lot of the details that may or may not be there. So here it's starting to look a little bit more like a forest as I've brought some of those dots down to the horizon line. Again, the most important part is going to be the tree tops to kind of give that staggered and forest-like feel. And as you're at that horizon line, you're not overlapping too much onto that green meadow, but you are bringing those dots all the way down to the bottom, overlapping those dots and creating this nice depth of a forest space. Again, if you have to mix your color 2 or 3 times and you've got some variations, totally okay. We are going to go in with some darker and lighter colors with the dots after we get our base color in there. All right, and before we finish the other side, just so you can see where we're going, I'm going to add a little bit more green. Again, just to kind of break up the space and feel like we've got some depth. Your application is the same, just still doing those dots, these blobs. Um, but even after we do this section, you will notice that it does look better with a couple of shades or a couple of colors in there. As you're doing this, do trust your instincts. If you're inclined to put some dots or a color somewhere I do not, go right ahead and do that for your painting. Again, as you're working on your treetops, if you need to kind of reshape or extend some of your trees, full permission to go ahead and do that. You can change your forest as needed. Nice. Really liking the addition of the darker color in here. It's making a big difference. And sometimes it's nice to kind of do the full half on one side and then go and do the other side so that way your brain kind of has an idea of what it looks like, which is what we will be doing now. So take your progress photo. We're going to go back to that original color, finish in the base color on that left-hand side, and then go in with some of the darker shades. You're doing a great job. I'm really proud of you. I hope you are enjoying the process. But again, I'm just glad you are getting creative and giving yourself some you time, which is always needed. All right, so mix that color again. I did move up to the medium flat brush just to get some of the whiter brush strokes or the whiter dots in here at that horizon line. So again, feel free to switch brushes or do the exact same thing that you did on the other side with the pointy brush. With these dots and this kind of repetitive mark making, it is a nice place to even vent some of your frustration. If you've got something in life that's irritating you or pissing you off, or something happened at work, some drama with a friend or family member, kind of put it into the painting. Take your anger out or your emotions out as you're making these dots, as you're kind of, as one student called it, stabbing the canvas with dots. And she felt much better after class by doing that. And that's a really bigger part of painting and creativity. It is more just to give you an activity to do while you can unwind and actually create something with your hands. So that's why I encourage all of my students to find creative outlets on a regular basis. And even if it ends up not being painting, maybe you end up doing drawing or sculpture or singing or dance, anything, but find creative outlets. Notice your stress level right now, and the more creative outlets that you have for yourself, the more easier it is to maintain and manage your stress in healthier ways. And the more stress-free individuals that we have in this world, I think it's a better world with more stress-free people. So that's why I teach what I teach and encourage what I encourage. All right, so add some more green. Let's get some of those darker contrasting shades in there. And again, if you need to, look at your painting from across the room and admire your work. This is an impressionistic style painting, so that's why we're not capturing every single detail. It's also why we're doing it rather quickly, because when it's an impression, it's just a hint, just an illusion of what is there. And all you're doing is making dots, but with all these dots together, it looks like a forest. All right, again, if you are inclined to put some of this darker shading somewhere I do not, or even go a little bit darker and using the direct green or changing colors, go right ahead and do that. Nice. Your painting's taking shape nicely. I'm very proud of you. All right, good spot for a progress photo. And we'll be moving into the next section. We've got a couple more sections to do, um, and that brings us into the conclusion of the painting. So we're getting there. All right, so flat brush, we're going to do green and blue and black. We are going for kind of a darker shade, and this is going to be for a more defined tree closer to our middle ground or foreground. All right. Before we make that tree, though, we're going to put some shading in that meadow. And also by putting these in the meadow, this is giving us a second layer and a bit more of an opaque coverage. And just like with the trees, by putting this darker shade on top of the lighter, it is giving the illusion of depth and space on this flat 2D surface. So I decided I needed to go a little bit darker, so I added a touch more black. You can add that to yours, or if you like your color mixture before, stick with what you were doing before. I wanted a bit more contrast on mine. All right, and adding just a bit more of an intense color on that bottom corner. And it is pretty cool that when we go with this darker color, just how much it kind of pops it forward and separates it from the background. All right, so optional, if you want to keep adding a little bit more, you can. Or if you like the way that your meadow and your land is looking, you can wait till the next section and leave yours as is and move it to the next section for the video. All right, pause that video, take your progress photo. All right, and before we do the tree, I apparently got the order out of order in my head. We're going to be putting some water ripple lines on our river. So pointy brush, we're going to do a mixture of blue and white. If you want to add a little gray to it, add a touch of black, you can. All right, and here we're just going right on top of the water. We're imagining that these are ripple water lines. So they're going to go right on top of these colors and even off the edges of the canvas. And I personally like calm water, so my lines are relatively straight, not too much movement to them. But if you would like a little more movement in your water, you can have a little more wiggle to your lines, a little more movement to your lines. So kind of your call. So again, I'm using that pointy brush, trying to use light pressure and making these water ripple lines. We're going to do this with we got our blue mixture here, and then we're also going to do it with some white and a light blue mixture. The best part for this is actually when the lines do overlap the sunset reflection. It's amazing how much when we look at this from a distance after you've done the lines that we immediately go, yep, that's water and that's a reflection. So keeping it kind of simple. All right, so now grab pure white. We're going to do the same thing, these little water ripple lines. So you can do these lines with a mixture of blue and white, the direct blue, or even just white. And it's actually good to have kind of those three shades in there, again, to kind of give that illusion of depth and space. And again, look at your painting from a distance. If you're like, you know what, maybe I need a few more ripple lines here, go ahead back and add them. So get in that habit of looking at your painting from a distance, assessing it, and then going back and adding what you need. So pause the video, take your progress photo. We're going to move in with the pointy brush and black paint and put a bit more of a defined tree in here, more of a silhouette of a tree. If you want to use a black and green color mixture, you can, or you can use just your direct black. I like the direct black just because it's more contrast between the forest behind it. And again, small little dots, Be a little bit more controlled with this tree because it's a bit more of a focal point on the painting. So take your time with this. Again, just little dots, starting off kind of close to the tree trunk at the top, and then having the branches kind of shoot out and get longer as it gets towards the bottom. Exhale as you touch the brush to the canvas to help steady out your hand. And if you need to, you can switch to a larger brush or a different brush. Trees come in all shapes and sizes. They sway in the wind. They dance in the hurricanes. They do all kinds of different stuff. They're never just a perfect tree. So take that out of your head if you're trying to get a perfectly symmetrical or perfect tree. That doesn't happen naturally in nature, unless it's perfect circumstances. um, but there's a lot of diversity. There's a lot of uniqueness in nature. So do not strive for perfection when you're doing a landscape or nature painting. Save that for other stuff in life. All right, looking good. Just a bunch of little dots as this tree, this silhouette tree is coming together nicely. And on this one, if you do want to put some other colors on top of the black to break it up, you can. You can do shades of gray or a green gray or even yellow and green. Kind of your call. I believe on this one, I leave it just a solid black tree. And then we're going to put some grass in that bottom left-hand corner. And that kind of brings us into the conclusion of today's painting. All right, so still with the pointy brush. Going to draw one more tree, a small tree. If you do not want to add this other tree, you don't have to. I'm still using the black paint, starting with that tree trunk and then little dots. And this is a little bit smaller than the tree on the left-hand side. Basically recreating the same formula. It is to your benefit to do things multiple times. And I do even recommend painting this painting multiple times. It's one of the few times that the next time that you paint it, it'll be easier. Maybe you'll add some extra stuff. Maybe something else makes more sense. And you just kind of keep growing more skills, compounding more skills. All right, now we're moving to the green and the blades of grass in that bottom left-hand corner. So still using the pointy brush, we're just going to be making little dash marks with the green. You can do a green and black mixture if you want, but imagining that each dash mark is a blade of grass. So you want to overlap these dash marks. Even think about how a blade of grass grows. So starting your blade, your dash mark, kind of at the bottom of the canvas as if it was growing out of that ground, and then flicking your brush out to create the blade of grass. Again, overlap these, get kind of excessive with them. Every 2 or 3 dash marks, grab more paint. So that way you're in that groove of applying more paint instead of just going through the motions. And then again, remember to look at your painting from that distance of 5 to 10 feet away. Do you need more blades of grass? Do you need another tree? Do you need more water ripple lines? And then go back and add what you need. So again, you can use your green, you can use a blue-green mixture, you can use the direct black, or a green and black mixture, anything you want. It is good to have a variety of colors in there, like we did demonstrated with other steps in today's painting. It just gives a bit more of that natural vibe, having different shades in there. All right, I think one last shade, the green and black mixture, possibly just straight up black. Your call. And this does bring us into the conclusion of today's painting. Add as many blades of grass as you want. Go back and add anything else if you want to put a duck floating in the river, if you want to put a kayaker in there, if you want to put a bear walking across the meadow, by all means, have fun and make it your own. Make it extra. That's half the fun of art. All right, so take your progress photo and great job today. Thank you so much for painting and getting creative. Thanks for hanging out with me for a little bit. Please don't wait too long to do your next painting. Please send me photos or tag me on socials. I like seeing what you guys create. And when you're ready, check out my Paint Your Pet course and the discount code there. It's a lot of fun. You will actually do better than you think you're capable of. So thanks again, and until next time, cheers.